They called it a demonstration, a controlled exercise in defensive medicine under simulated threat conditions at Naval Special Warfare Group 1, Coronado, California. But everyone standing in that compound on the morning of September 14, 2024, knew the truth. This wasn't about teaching techniques. This was about breaking a woman who didn't belong. At least that's what 282 Navy SEALs believed when the sun came up that morning. They were wrong, but understanding why they were wrong requires going back. 4 years back, 4,200 miles east, to a forward operating base in Kandahar province, Afghanistan, where Captain Alara Thorne earned a reputation that would follow her like a shadow, where she learned that survival isn't about strength, it's about precision, and that sometimes saving a life means accepting losses you can never repair. Kandahar province, Afghanistan, September 2020. The first round came through the west wall at a 45-degree angle, punching a hole the size of a fist through sandbags that were supposed to stop it. The second came 3 seconds later, closer, kicking up dust that hung in the air like smoke. Alara Thorne didn't flinch. She was elbow deep in a man's spine, and flinching meant he died. The operating tent wasn't really a tent anymore. It was a canvas shell wrapped around desperation, lit by 2 battery lamps that made everything look like an old photograph. Outside voices shouted coordinates. Inside, blood ran off the table in streams that had stopped bothering her months ago. The man on the table was a SEAL, Lieutenant Daniel Brennan, 30 years old, 6'2" when he was standing. Right now, he wasn't standing. Wouldn't be standing again, not the way he used to. Shrapnel had turned his T12 and L1 vertebrae into fragments. Those fragments had severed his spinal cord like a knife through rope. She worked fast. Scalpel, retractor, suction. Her hands moved in rhythm, a dance she'd performed so many times it didn't require thought anymore. Just muscle memory and focus that narrowed the world down to tissue and bone and the thin line between life and death. Another round punched through the tent. Closer. The lamp to her left flickered. "Captain, we need to move." The corpsman's voice cracked on the last word. Young kid, 22 maybe. First deployment. He'd seen men die before, but never like this. Never while someone was trying to save them. "Not done," Alara said. She didn't look up. Her fingers traced the edge of a metal fragment embedded in the dura mater, the protective covering around the spinal cord. Pull it wrong, he bleeds out in 90 seconds. Leave it in infection, kills him in 3 days. She pulled it clean, smooth, dropped it in the pan with a sound like a coin falling. The SEAL's breathing changed, shallow, fast, shock creeping in like fog. "Hang on, Lieutenant," she said. Her voice carried a Montana accent that 8 years of military service hadn't quite erased. "I need you to stay with me." His voice came out wrong, slurred. "Tell Marcus, I'm sorry, won't make his wedding next month." "You'll tell him yourself." "Emma's waiting. Tell her I love." "You'll tell her too. Stay with me, Daniel." Another round. This one found the corner post and the tent sagged like something dying. The corpsman grabbed her shoulder. "Captain, they're zeroing us. We have to go." Alara reached for her M4 carbine propped against the table, flicked the safety off with her thumb, brought it up one-handed, the stock pressed against her hip, put 3 rounds through the west wall where the incoming fire had originated. Controlled bursts. Precise. The kind of shooting that came from a childhood in Montana, where you learned to hit what you aimed at or you didn't eat. The incoming fire stopped. She set the rifle down, picked up the suture kit. "Now we wait for the bird." The corpsman stared at her. She could see it in his eyes. That moment when he was trying to reconcile what he just saw with what he thought he knew about combat medics, about women, about the rules that said you were either a shooter or a healer, but never both. She finished the closure in 6 minutes. By the time the medevac helicopter touched down, the SEAL's vitals had stabilized. Weak pulse, blood pressure low, but holding. They loaded him onto the bird. The rotors kicked up dust that got in her eyes, her mouth, her lungs. She watched the helicopter rise into the pre-dawn darkness, a shadow against stars that looked exactly like the stars over Montana. And she thought about the brother, Marcus, about a wedding Daniel just saved him from missing, about promises made by dying men who didn't know yet that they'd survived. What she didn't think about, couldn't think about, was the choice she'd just made. The choice that would give Daniel Brennan 20 more years with a woman named Emma, with daughters he didn't know were coming, with a life measured not in steps but in heartbeats and sunrises and moments that mattered more than legs ever could. But Marcus Brennan wouldn't see it that way. Marcus would see a brother in a wheelchair, and he would spend 4 years deciding that someone needed to pay for that. 6 months later, Walter Reed National Military Medical Center, Bethesda, Maryland. The package arrived on a Tuesday. Standard military forwarding. No return address beyond the hospital postal code. Inside, 2 photographs in a letter written in handwriting that shook at the edges. The first photograph showed Lieutenant Daniel Brennan in a wheelchair. He was thin, pale. Tubes ran out of his arms, a brace wrapped around his neck. But he was smiling. And next to the wheelchair, in 2 small bassinets that looked too big for them, were newborn twins. Girls, impossibly small. Born premature in December while their father was still learning to accept that his legs were gone, but his life wasn't. The letter was short, direct, the kind of thing a soldier writes when words feel inadequate, but silence feels worse. Captain Thorne, my daughters were born December 20th, 2020, while I was in rehabilitation. I wasn't supposed to meet them. The doctor said if I died in Kandahar, they would have been born without a father. You gave me the chance to hold them, to watch them grow, to be there for every moment they'll never remember, but I'll never forget. Thank you for my life. Thank you for their father. Lieutenant Daniel Brennan, United States Navy. Alara stared at that photograph for a long time, at the twins who wouldn't remember the tent full of blood, the bullets punching through canvas, the choice their father's doctor made in 90 seconds that gave them a lifetime with a man who couldn't walk but could love them more than anything. Then she looked at the second photograph. It showed Marcus Brennan at his wedding. October 2020, 6 weeks after Kandahar. He stood at an altar in dress blues that fit him like they were tailored by God. Next to him in a wheelchair that was still too new, still too foreign, sat his brother Daniel, best man, smiling despite everything, despite the wheelchair, despite the future that had changed in the space between one heartbeat and the next. But Marcus wasn't smiling. Marcus was looking at the camera with eyes that held something cold, something that had been growing for 6 weeks and would keep growing for 4 more years. On the back of the photograph in handwriting that was neat and controlled and absolutely certain someone had written, "He should be standing here. You failed him. One day you'll kneel for what you did. MB." Alara read those words 3 times. Then she put both photographs in a folder, filed it in a cabinet she rarely opened, tried to forget about the promise of a reckoning that would come someday when Marcus Brennan decided it was time to collect on a debt she didn't owe. 4 years later, Naval Special Warfare Group 1, Coronado, California. September 2024. Present day. The orders came through on a Wednesday. Brief, official, the kind of paperwork that looked routine until you read between the lines and realized nothing about it was routine at all. Captain Alara Thorne, report to Naval Special Warfare Group 1, Coronado, California. Demonstration of defensive protocols for combat medics under simulated threat conditions. Audience 282 active duty SEALs. Duration 4 hours. Purpose readiness evaluation for forward medical deployment integration. She read it twice. The second time she noticed the attachment. A volunteer list for demonstration participants. 10 names, 8 she didn't recognize. 2 she did. Trainee Reed Holloway, 26 years old. Second-year SEAL candidate. No deployment history. No red flags. Senior operator Marcus Brennan, 30 years old, 8 years active duty, 3 deployments. Brother to Lieutenant Daniel Brennan, medically retired 2020. Alara sat with that information for 10 minutes. Then she picked up her phone and called the one person who might understand what she was walking into. The phone rang 4 times before Master Chief Victor Kane answered. "Been expecting your call, Captain." His voice carried a Texas accent that 40 years of military service hadn't quite erased. Deep, authoritative. The voice of a man who'd seen things that would break most people and had somehow come out the other side still believing in things like honor and duty. "Master Chief," Alara said, "I'm assuming you know why I'm calling. Marcus Brennan volunteered for your demonstration. You want to know if it's personal." "Is it?" Kane was quiet for a moment. In the background, she could hear the Pacific. Waves on rocks. The eternal sound of California trying to erode the continent one shore at a time. "Come to my office," he said finally. "Tomorrow, 0700. There are things you need to know before you step into that compound." He hung up before she could ask what things. Alara arrived at Building 7 on the south side of the compound at 0655. Early, but Kane would expect that. Would judge her for being late but wouldn't comment on being early. That was his way. Expectations communicated through silence. He opened the door before she knocked. "Captain Thorne, come in." The office was exactly what she expected. Minimal furniture, military memorabilia on the walls, photographs from deployments arranged in precise rows, commendations in shadow boxes. The home of a man who'd spent 40 years in uniform and didn't know how to be anyone else. On his desk sat a folder, old, worn at the edges. The kind of thing that had been opened and closed 1,000 times. Kane gestured to it. Before we talk about Marcus Brennan, I need to tell you about Captain Rachel Ashford. He opened the folder. Inside was a photograph from 1991. Desert Storm, Kuwait. It showed a woman in her 30s, Air Force flight suit, arms crossed, standing in front of an HH-60 Pave Hawk helicopter. Behind her, sand stretched to a horizon that looked like the edge of the world. Captain Margaret Ashford, Kane said. Call sign Maggie, February 1991. She was a convoy commander. Logistics. Not sexy work, but someone had to do it. He pulled out another photograph. This one showed a convoy of trucks on a desert road. Smoke in the distance. The kind of smoke that comes from things burning that shouldn't. I was in her convoy, Kane continued. His voice had changed. Softer now. The voice of a man looking back at a moment that defined him. 25 years old. Cocky as hell. I protested her assignment. Went up the chain. Said we didn't want a woman in command. Said she'd get us killed. He was quiet for a long moment. Command ignored us, put her in charge anyway. So we made her life hell, questioned every order, challenged every decision, made jokes, made her prove herself every single day. What changed? Alara asked. Kane pulled out a third photograph. This one showed a crater. Desert sand, twisted metal, scorch marks. The kind of destruction that came from ordnance designed to kill people in large numbers. Scud missile, he said. February 15th, 1991. Intelligence came through about a possible launch targeting our primary route. Captain Ashford wanted to divert. I argued, said she was being paranoid, said the original route was fine. He set the photograph down. His hands were steady, but Alara could see the tension in them. The memory made physical. She pulled rank, made us divert. 3 minutes later, a Scud hit our original route, killed 80 men and 2 other convoys that hadn't changed course. You survived because she trusted her instincts over your opinions. I survived because a woman I'd spent weeks disrespecting had the courage to make a decision I wouldn't. And when we got to the impact site, when I saw what would have happened to us, I realized something. He looked up, met her eyes. My pride almost got me killed. My assumptions about who could lead were built on nothing but fear and tradition. Captain Ashford could do the job better than most men I knew, but I couldn't see it because I wasn't looking for competence. I was looking for confirmation of what I already believed. He reached into a drawer, pulled out a knife, old, worn. The handle was wood smoothed by decades of use. The blade had been sharpened so many times the original manufacturer's stamp was almost gone. Captain Ashford gave me this after the war, told me to carry it as a reminder. When someone demands you kneel before them, when someone tries to intimidate you into submission, remember that respect is earned through competence, not demanded through fear. He set the knife on the desk between them. I'm telling you this because what's about to happen at that demonstration isn't new. It's the same fight Captain Ashford fought in '91. The same fight women have been fighting since the military integrated. Marcus Brennan is going to test you. He's going to try to break you. Not because you're incompetent, but because you represent something he can't accept. That his brother's alive because I made the right choice. No, that his brother's alive because a woman made a choice he wouldn't have made. That scares him more than he'll ever admit. Kane stood, walked to the window. Outside, the morning sun was burning off the fog, turning everything sharp and clear. This demonstration isn't just about you, Captain. Naval Command is watching. They're testing whether female medics can handle SEAL-level harassment, whether you can perform under pressure when men are actively trying to break you. He turned back to face her. And there's something else you need to know. He pulled out his phone, pulled up an email, showed it to her. The sender was listed as Office of the Secretary of Defense. The subject line read Female Combat Integration Assessment. Live observation authorized. Senator Richard Michaels is watching your demonstration. Live feed. He sits on the Armed Services Committee, and he's had a bill sitting in his desk drawer for 6 months. The Female Combat Exclusion Reinstatement Act. If you fail tomorrow, if you break under pressure, that bill goes to committee within 48 hours. Alara felt something cold settle in her stomach. They're using me as evidence. They're using you as a test case. You succeed, it proves integration works. You fail, it proves women can't handle combat stress. 20 million women serving in the United States military are watching whether you know it or not. Kane picked up Rachel Ashford's knife, held it out to her. Take this. When they try to make you kneel, when they demand submission, remember what Rachel told me. Stand taller. Don't give them what they want. Give them what they need to see. Laura took the knife. The weight of it was substantial, dense, solid. The weight of history made physical. One more thing, Kane said. Marcus Brennan requested this assignment specifically. He's been planning this for 4 years. Whatever happens in that ring tomorrow, it's personal. He wants to humiliate you in front of 282 witnesses. He wants to prove you don't belong. What do you want me to do? Kane smiled. It wasn't a comforting smile. Prove him wrong. That night, Alara couldn't sleep. She lay in her quarters at the base, staring at the ceiling, running through scenarios. Marcus would attack during the demonstration. That much was obvious. The question was how. Would he follow protocols and make it look accidental? Or would he break discipline entirely and force a confrontation? At 2300 hours, she gave up on sleep. Got dressed, went for a walk around the compound. The base was quiet. Most personnel had taken evening leave. Security lights cast long shadows across empty training areas. In the distance, she could hear the Pacific, that eternal sound of water trying to wear down land, patient, relentless, indifferent to human concerns. She found herself near the equipment storage area on the east side of the compound, a collection of sheds and containers where training gear was kept between exercises. She wasn't looking for anything specific, just walking, trying to clear her head. That's when she heard the voices. 2 men, speaking quietly but not quietly enough. She moved closer, stayed in the shadows between buildings, listened. Tomorrow we don't just beat her. The voice was familiar, deep, controlled. Marcus Brennan. We humiliate her, make her understand she doesn't belong. How? A younger voice, uncertain. Reed Holloway, maybe. First we make her kneel. I'll demand it, in front of everyone. If she refuses, we have justification for what comes next. What comes next? We kick her down, both of us, simultaneous. Make it look like reflex during a defensive demonstration. Command can't punish reflexes. What if she gets seriously hurt? Then she learns the same lesson Dan learned. Marcus's voice went cold. Some choices have permanent consequences. Alara stayed absolutely still. Her heart was pounding, but her breathing remained steady. Years of combat medicine had taught her to control her physiological responses, to observe without reacting. I don't know, man. Reed sounded nervous now. This feels like more than demonstration. It is more than demonstration. It's justice. My brother should be standing right now, walking, running, being a SEAL. Instead, he's in a wheelchair because she chose wrong. Tomorrow, 282 men are going to see what happens when women play soldier. They're going to see her kneel. And if she doesn't kneel, they're going to see her get kicked down and stay down. And if she doesn't stay down, Marcus laughed. It wasn't a pleasant sound. Then we make her stay down. The voices moved away, footsteps fading into the distance. Alara waited 5 minutes, then 10. When she was certain they were gone, she walked back to her quarters. She didn't write down what she'd heard, didn't record it, didn't report it to Kane, because reporting it would mean calling off the demonstration. And calling off the demonstration would mean Marcus won without ever stepping into the ring. Instead, she sat at her desk and thought about the choice she'd made in Kandahar, the choice that saved Daniel Brennan's life, the choice that gave him 20 more years with a woman named Emma, with twin daughters who would never know how close they came to growing up without a father. She thought about Marcus's words. Some choices have permanent consequences. He was right about that, but he was wrong about who was going to learn that lesson tomorrow. At 0200 hours, Alara picked up her phone, stared at the number she'd kept for 4 years, but never called. The number that had come with that package from Walter Reed. The number written on a card that said, "If you ever need anything, call." Daniel Brennan. She dialed. The phone rang 4 times, then a voice answered. Groggy, confused. The voice of someone pulled from sleep. "Hello. Daniel, it's Alara Thorne." Silence on the other end, not the silence of confusion. The silence of recognition followed by a dozen questions forming simultaneously. "Captain Thorne." His voice changed, alert now. "After 4 years, why now?" "Your brother volunteered for my demonstration tomorrow at Coronado." The silence stretched longer this time. When Daniel spoke again, his voice was different, resigned, like he'd been expecting this call for 4 years and had finally run out of ways to prevent it. He's been obsessed since the wedding, blames you for everything, for the wheelchair, for the life he thinks I lost. I've tried to talk to him. He won't listen. Do you blame me? The question hung between them. 4 years of distance compressed into 5 words. Every morning, Daniel said quietly, I wake up at 05:30. I transfer from bed to wheelchair. I roll into my daughter's room. They're 4 years old now. They jump on me, hug me, ask me to make pancakes. And while I'm making those pancakes, while I'm watching them eat and laugh and exist, I think about the choice you made in Kandahar. He paused. Alara could hear breathing on the other end, the sound of a man choosing his words carefully. You had 90 seconds. Taliban was breaching the perimeter. You could have evacuated me, and I would have died in the helicopter. Or you could complete the surgery and save my life, but take my legs. You chose life. And because you chose life, I get to make pancakes for my daughters. I get to read them stories. I get to watch them grow up. His voice cracked slightly on the last sentence. So no, Captain. I don't blame you. I thank you every single day. But Marcus sees the wheelchair. He can't see past what I lost to understand what I gained. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. Be prepared. Marcus wants to humiliate you. He wants 282 men to watch you break. He thinks that if he can make you kneel, if he can prove you're not good enough, then somehow that justifies what happened to me. He's going to be disappointed. Alara, Daniel's voice went serious. Be careful tomorrow. My brother is a good man who's made himself believe a terrible thing. That's more dangerous than a bad man who knows he's bad. I know. Because from where I'm sitting, you're walking into an ambush. And the thing about ambushes is that even if you survive, you carry the scars forever. I've survived ambushes before. Not like this. This one's personal. This one's public. And this one has stakes you might not fully understand yet. What stakes? Daniel was quiet for a moment. There are people watching this demonstration who want you to fail, who need you to fail to prove their point. Marcus is just the weapon they're using. But the real fight isn't against my brother. It's against everyone who thinks that day in Kandahar proved women can't handle combat medicine under pressure. Tomorrow, you're not just proving Marcus wrong. You're proving them all wrong. I know. Then good luck, Captain. And Alara, yeah. When Marcus demands you kneel, don't. Not for him. Not for the 282 witnesses. Not for anyone. Stand. Because the moment you kneel, you've already lost. Not because kneeling is weakness, but because you're letting fear make the choice for you. The line went dead. Alara sat in the darkness of her quarters, holding the phone, thinking about Daniel's words, about choices made in 90 seconds that echoed for years, about brothers who couldn't see past loss to understand gain, about demonstrations that were really trials, about 282 witnesses who would remember tomorrow for reasons none of them fully understood yet. At 05:45, the sun began to rise over Coronado. Alara stood at her window and watched the sky turn from black to gray to that particular shade of blue that only existed in California mornings. Behind her on the desk, her gear was arranged in precise rows. Tourniquets, hemostatic gauze, chest seals, gloves, all of it organized exactly the way she'd organized it for 8 years. Muscle memory, routine, the small rituals that separated professionals from amateurs. And next to the gear wrapped in cloth was Rachel Ashford's knife. The knife Kane had given her with the promise that she'd know when she needed it. She picked it up, felt the weight, the balance, the history compressed into steel and wood. Rachel Ashford had carried this in 1991 when men had demanded she prove herself, had carried it through a war that tested her every day, had given it to Kane with the wisdom that respect was earned, not demanded. Now it was hers. Now it was her turn to stand when others demanded she kneel. She opened her journal. The same journal she'd kept since her first deployment. 8 years of entries. 8 years of choices made under pressure. 8 years of learning that medicine wasn't just about saving bodies. It was about understanding that every choice had weight, that every decision echoed in ways you couldn't predict or control. She wrote September 14th, 2024. In 6 hours, I'll stand before 282 Navy SEALs and demonstrate defensive protocols. Marcus Brennan will demand I kneel. He wants humiliation. He wants vindication for a choice I made 4 years ago that saved his brother's life. He wants 282 witnesses to watch me break. But I learned something in Kandahar. You don't survive by kneeling. You survive by making the hard choices others won't, by choosing precision over pride, by choosing life over everything else. Today, Marcus will learn what his brother learned, that some choices are permanent, that some consequences can't be undone, and that the woman who saved Daniel Brennan's life is the same woman who will stand when Marcus demands she fall. She closed the journal, checked her gear one last time, put Rachel Ashford's knife in her pocket where she could feel the weight of it against her hip. A reminder, a promise, a connection to a woman who'd fought this fight before and had won by refusing to be anything other than exactly who she was. At 0600 hours, Elara walked out of her quarters and toward the training compound where 282 Navy SEALs were already gathering, where Marcus Brennan was waiting with 4 years of anger and a plan to break her, where she would make a choice that would be remembered long after everyone in that compound had forgotten why it mattered. The Pacific wind came in cold off the water, carrying salt and the smell of low tide. Behind her, the sun continued its rise. In front of her, the compound spread out in a maze of buildings and training areas that all looked the same. Concrete and chain link and the kind of institutional architecture that existed only on military bases. She found the training area on the south side of the compound. From 100 yards away, she could see them. 282 men arranged in loose formation, some standing, some sitting on equipment crates, all of them watching the entrance, waiting. And in the center of them, standing in a 20-foot ring marked out in white paint on the concrete, was Marcus Brennan. He saw her. Even from this distance, she could see his eyes tracking her movement, could see the set of his shoulders, the way he stood with his weight slightly forward, like he was always ready to move. Like he'd been waiting 4 years for this moment and was finally about to get what he'd wanted. Elara kept walking. She didn't hurry, didn't hesitate, just walked at a steady pace that said she'd been here before, had done this before, knew exactly what she was walking into. Master Chief Kane was there, standing at the north edge of the ring, arms crossed, face unreadable. Next to him was a Navy commander she didn't recognize, silver oak leaves on his collar. The kind of officer who showed up when something mattered to people above his pay grade. She crossed the outer ring of SEALs, felt their eyes on her, some curious, some dismissive, some openly hostile. She'd learned years ago not to waste energy trying to categorize them. They'd categorize themselves soon enough by how they reacted. She walked to the center of the ring, set her pack down. The concrete was warm under her boots. She could hear small sounds amplified by the silence. Boot scrapes, someone coughing, the distant hum of a helicopter miles away. She didn't speak immediately, just stood there, letting them look, letting them see a woman 5'7", 145 pounds, auburn hair pulled back in a tactical bun that wouldn't come loose if someone grabbed it. Standard issue fatigues, no rank insignia on her chest, just a name tape that read Thorn. Medical kit clipped to her belt, M18 holstered on her hip. Nothing special, nothing threatening, just another soldier. That was the first lesson. Let them underestimate you before you teach them why they shouldn't. Master Chief Kane stepped forward, his voice carrying across the compound with the authority of 4 decades in uniform. Gentlemen, you're here for a demonstration of defensive protocols for combat medics operating under hostile conditions. Your instructor is Captain Elara Thorne. 3 deployments. Bronze Star with Valor, she will demonstrate techniques for maintaining casualty care while engaging threats at close quarters. You will observe. You will learn. You will keep your mouths shut unless you have an intelligent question. Someone in the crowd snickered. Kane's head snapped toward the sound. Did I say something funny, petty officer? The snickering stopped. Kane stepped back. The ring belonged to Elara now. She looked out at the faces, found the ones who were paying attention. Really paying attention. The older ones mostly. Men who'd been in combat long enough to recognize competence when they saw it, regardless of packaging. Those were the ones she needed to reach. The rest would follow, or they wouldn't. I'm not here to prove women belong in combat, she said. Her voice didn't carry the way Kane's did, but it was clear, steady. That's been proven. I'm here to show you what happens when you're treating a casualty and someone decides you're the next target. She gestured to her medical kit. Field medics are high-value targets. We carry morphine antibiotics supplies that enemy forces want. We're focused on wounded personnel, which makes us vulnerable. And in close quarters, combat vulnerable means dead unless you know how to turn vulnerability into advantage. A voice from the crowd. How's a 145-pound medic going to turn anything into an advantage against a 200-pound fighter. Elara didn't look for the source, just kept her eyes on the middle distance. Physics. That got their attention. She gestured to a volunteer, a SEAL she'd been briefed about. Petty officer second class, 200 pounds, respectful disposition. He stepped into the ring and stood where she indicated, about 7 feet away. The scenario is simple, she said. I'm treating a wounded soldier. She knelt next to an imaginary casualty, hands moving through practiced motions of checking vitals, applying pressure to phantom wounds. Hostile approaches from behind. The SEAL moved toward her, slow, telegraphed. The kind of movement designed to make the instructor look good. My objective isn't to win a fight, it's to create a window where I can either escape or neutralize the threat long enough to complete medical treatment. The SEAL reached for her shoulder. Elara moved. Not fast, not dramatic, just efficient. Her body rotated, left shoulder dipping as her right elbow came up and caught the underside of his extending arm. His momentum carried him forward, which was exactly what she wanted. She used it, pulled where he was already pushing. His weight shifted onto his front foot, and she stepped into the space he'd vacated, her hip against his, and suddenly his center of gravity was somewhere he couldn't control it. He went down. Not hard, controlled. Her hand on his wrist, guiding the fall, making sure he landed on his shoulder instead of his head. She released him, stepped back, returned to her kneeling position next to the imaginary casualty. Total elapsed time, 3 seconds. The SEAL stood up, nodded, backed out of the ring. Elara looked at the crowd. Some of them were leaning forward now. Others still had their arms crossed, but the body language had shifted. Skepticism hadn't disappeared, but it had been joined by something else. Curiosity. That worked because he was cooperating, someone said. Elara stood. Volunteer. A different SEAL stepped forward. Bigger, maybe 240 pounds. Senior chief based on his collar. He didn't look friendly. Same scenario, Elara said, but this time full speed with the training parameters. Try to grab me. Actually try. The senior chief grinned, not a nice grin. Yes, ma'am. She knelt again, turned her back to him, heard his boots on concrete, moving faster than the first volunteer, closing the distance in 2 long strides. Felt the air move as his hand reached for her. She dropped and pivoted. His hand closed on empty space where her shoulder had been. Her hands caught his wrist, both of them. Firm grip, and as his weight carried him forward, she pulled in the same direction he was already moving. 240 pounds of forward momentum met a rotational force that used that momentum against itself. Basic physics, basic biomechanics. The kind of thing you learned if someone taught you and you practiced 10,000 times until your body understood it better than your brain. The senior chief hit the mat harder than the first volunteer. Not quite controlled, she'd pulled the force at the last second, but he still landed with a sound that made people wince. He stayed down for 2 seconds, then pushed himself up, shaking his head, looked at her with different eyes now. Respect starting to edge out the skepticism. How, he asked. Your momentum was approximately 1,100 pound-feet of force. I applied 15 pounds of lateral pressure at a 12-inch moment arm. The math did the rest. She helped him to his feet. He nodded to her once. Returned to the formation. The crowd's energy was different now. She could feel it. Not convinced yet, but paying attention. That was enough for now. She ran 3 more demonstrations. Different techniques, different angles of approach. Each time the volunteers got more aggressive. Each time she adapted. Showed them how size didn't matter when you understood leverage. How strength was irrelevant when you knew where joints failed under rotational stress. How fear could be managed with breathing and training, and the simple act of practicing the same movements until they became automatic. By the 4th demonstration, some of the SEALs were asking questions, real questions, about angles, about timing, about the specific physics of momentum redirection. Marcus Brennan hadn't moved, hadn't spoken. Just stood at the edge of the ring with his arms crossed and his eyes locked on Elara like he was trying to find the flaw. The weakness. The moment where she'd reveal herself as fraud or failure or whatever narrative he'd built in his head over 4 years of blaming her for his brother's wheelchair. Reed Holloway stood next to him, younger, nervous energy barely contained, whispering something to Marcus. Marcus's response was too quiet to hear, but the expression on his face said enough. Elara turned to face them directly for the first time. Final demonstration, she said. 2 attacker scenario, simultaneous threat from different angles. Different protocol because you can't redirect two people the same way you redirect one. She looked at Kane. He gave the slightest nod. Senior Operator Brennan, Trainee Holloway, you're up. They stepped into the ring. Marcus moved with the confidence of someone who'd done this thousands of times. Reed tried to match it but couldn't quite hide his nervousness. They were both bigger than the previous volunteers, heavier, and they had something the others hadn't. Motivation beyond following orders. Marcus wanted to hurt her. She could see it in the way he rolled his shoulders, cracked his neck, adjusted his stance, the small rituals of violence preparing itself. Reed just wanted to impress Marcus, which made him predictable. Kane stepped forward. Demonstration parameters. Captain Thorne will be in a treatment position. You two will approach from different angles. Full contact authorized within training limits. Head strikes prohibited. Intentional trauma prohibited. Acknowledge. Acknowledged, Reed said quickly. Marcus said nothing, just stared at Alara. Senior Operator, I need verbal acknowledgement. Acknowledged. The word came out flat, empty of everything except the bare minimum of compliance. Alara knelt in the center of the ring. Behind her, 282 Navy SEALs had gone quiet in the way crowds do when they sense something about to happen. Not entertainment, something else. Something that would be remembered and talked about later in places where stories became legends, became warnings. She centered herself. 4-count breathing. In hold, out hold. The world narrowed down to physical sensation. Concrete under her knees, sun on her shoulders, salt air. The distant sound of traffic on Silver Strand Boulevard. And in her peripheral vision, two men positioning themselves at 10 o'clock and 2 o'clock, spacing themselves for a coordinated attack. Two-attacker defensive protocol, she said, her voice carried across the silence. The objective is survival and escape, not victory, not dominance, just creating enough space to either retreat or neutralize the immediate threat while maintaining the ability to continue medical treatment. She looked at Marcus, at Reed, let them see that she knew exactly what they were planning. This is live combat simulation. Strikes will be real. Injuries are possible. Acknowledge the risk. We acknowledge, Reed said. Reed. Marcus smiled. It wasn't a pleasant smile. Oh, we acknowledge. But Marcus didn't move into attack position. Instead, he straightened, stood tall. His voice carried across the entire compound. Loud, clear, designed for 282 witnesses. Before we begin, I have a question for Captain Thorne. Alara stayed kneeling, waiting. 4 years ago, you made a choice in Kandahar. You operated on my brother, Lieutenant Daniel Brennan. You saved his life, but you took his legs. You chose to cripple him rather than let him die with dignity. You made that choice for him, without asking, without considering what kind of life you were condemning him to. His voice went harder. So here's what's going to happen, Captain. You're going to kneel before me, not in that position. Here, in front of me. You're going to apologize to every SEAL in this compound for pretending you belong, for pretending that day in Kandahar was anything other than failure. For 4 years of letting people call you a hero when you're just someone who chose wrong. The compound was absolutely silent, 282 men holding their breath. And if you don't kneel, Marcus continued, if you refuse to show the humility and accountability that your failure demands, then we're going to show these 282 men what happens when women play soldier. We're going to show them what happens when someone refuses to accept their limitations. He took a step closer. So what's it going to be, Captain? Are you going to kneel before me, or are we going to kick you down and make you stay down? Alara stood slowly. Her ribs ached from where she'd slept wrong the night before. Her hip was tight from the morning run. Small things. Physical reminders that bodies wear down and age catches everyone eventually. She looked at Marcus, then at Reed, then at the 282 witnesses who were watching this moment that would define everything that came after. She reached up, unpinned the captain's bars from her collar, held them for a moment, then walked to Kane and placed them in his hand. I'm not an officer in this ring, she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. I'm a combatant. Kane looked at the rank insignia in his palm, looked at her. She could see the question in his eyes. Are you sure? She nodded once. He closed his fist around the bars, stepped back. Alara returned to face Marcus. I'm not apologizing, she said. Her voice was calm, clinical, the voice of someone who'd made peace with hard choices long ago. And I don't kneel, not for you, not for anyone, Not ever. Marcus's jaw tightened. Then you'll be kicked down, and you'll stay down, and every man here will see that you don't belong. I removed my rank, Alara said. That means this isn't assault on a superior officer. This is mutual combat under training protocols. You want to kick me down, Marcus, try. The crowd shifted, some men leaning back, others leaning forward. Everyone understanding that the demonstration had just become something else entirely. Not training, not protocol, trial by combat, the oldest form of settling disputes, the most honest. And then the moment broke in a way no one expected. A sound cut through the tension, the distinctive whir of wheelchair motors. Electric, quiet but unmistakable in the silence. 282 men turned, looked, watched as the crowd parted. Lieutenant Daniel Brennan rolled through the gap they created, stopped at the edge of the ring. His wheelchair was sleek, modern, the kind that cost more than most people's cars. But it was still a wheelchair. Still a permanent reminder of choices made in 90 seconds under circumstances most people couldn't imagine. He looked at his brother, then at Alara, then back to Marcus. Dan, Marcus said. His voice had changed, confusion replacing certainty. What are you doing here, watching? This doesn't concern you. It concerns me more than anyone else here. Marcus took a step toward his brother. She crippled you. She saved me. You're in a wheelchair because of her. Daniel's voice went quiet, the kind of quiet that makes people lean in to hear. I'm alive because of her. I'm a father because of her. I'm a husband because of her. Every moment I've had for the past 4 years exists because Captain Thorne made a choice you're too angry to understand. She chose wrong. She chose life, Marcus. My life. And you spent 4 years being angry that I'm not dead. The words hung in the air like something physical. Something that couldn't be taken back or softened or explained away. Marcus's hands curled into fists. I just wanted you to walk again. I know, but that wasn't an option. The option was death or wheelchair. Captain Thorne chose wheelchair. I accepted that choice. You need to accept it too. I can't. Then that's your failure, not hers. Marcus turned back to Alara. His eyes were different now. Not just anger anymore. Something more complicated. Pain and confusion and 4 years of narrative collapsing under the weight of his brother's words. This doesn't change anything, he said. You still need to kneel. No, Daniel said. She doesn't. Marcus wasn't listening anymore. He was looking at Reed, nodding, the signal they'd planned, the signal Alara had heard them discuss the night before when she'd overheard them plotting behind the equipment sheds. She saw it coming, saw Marcus position himself at her 2 o'clock, saw Reed move to 10 o'clock, saw them settle into stance, wait forward, coiled, ready. She had maybe 2 seconds to react, to call it off, to step back and let Kane intervene and turn this into an administrative issue instead of a physical one. Instead, she knelt, returned to the treatment position, back to both of them, hands on her knees, head down slightly, the posture of someone treating a casualty, the posture of vulnerability, the posture of someone giving them exactly what they wanted, a clear shot, an easy target. 282 witnesses watching someone who'd refused to kneel, now kneeling anyway in the most vulnerable position possible. Marcus and Reed moved simultaneously, coordinated, practiced. The plan they'd rehearsed the night before playing out exactly as designed. They launched themselves at her. Both of them, same instant, boots leaving the ground, 230 pounds from the right, 190 from the left. Combined 420 pounds of force moving at roughly 5 miles per hour. All of it aimed at a woman who weighed 145 pounds and was kneeling with her back turned. Alara saw it in her peripheral vision. Calculated trajectory, impact points, force vectors, the physics of violence breaking down into mathematics she could work with. She started to move, started to rotate, started to shift her weight. Too late. Marcus's boot caught her in the ribs, right side. The impact lifted her off her knees. Reed's boot hit simultaneously. Left hip, left thigh. Double impact from opposing angles. 420 pounds of coordinated violence hitting someone who weighed less than half that. The concrete came up fast. She hit hard. Right side first, shoulder, then hip, then her head barely missing the ground because she managed to tuck her chin at the last microsecond. The breath exploded out of her lungs in a sound that was part grunt, part gasp, all pain. The world tilted, went bright at the edges. She could taste copper. Blood from where she'd bitten her lip, or her cheek. Something. She couldn't breathe. Her diaphragm had spasmed from the impact. Paralyzed. That terrible moment after getting hit where your body forgets how to pull air into lungs that don't want to inflate. She lay there. 3 seconds. Maybe 4. Time moving strange when your body was trying to decide if it was injured or just hurt. There was a difference. Injured meant something was broken or torn or damaged in a way that wouldn't heal right. Hurt just meant pain, and pain was temporary. She cataloged sensations through the fog of impact shock. Ribs ached but moved when she finally gasped air. No grinding, no sharp edges, bruised, not cracked. Hip throbbed but bore weight when she tested it internally. Leg tingled but responded to neural signals. Hurt, not injured. She could work with hurt. Around her she could hear sounds filtering back. Boots on concrete, someone shouting. Kane's voice sharp with command saying something she couldn't process yet. And above it all, laughter. Reed's voice, young, nervous, trying to cover anxiety with bravado. Oops, reflex. Sorry, ma'am. Marcus's voice, quieter. False concern coating real malice. You okay, Captain? That looked bad. Maybe you should sit this one out. 282 men watching, waiting to see if she'd stay down, if she'd quit, if she'd prove Marcus right by breaking under pressure. Alara put her right hand flat on the concrete. Pushed. Her body argued. Every nerve ending that had just been trauma-bonded through impact screaming at her to stay down, to give up, to let someone else handle this. She pushed harder, rolled to her knees. The world swam for a second, vision blurring at the edges, then clearing, coming back into focus piece by piece. Concrete under her hands, blood on her gloves. The taste of copper strong now. Her lips split, maybe her gum. Didn't matter. She stood. 282 Navy SEALs went absolutely silent. The kind of silence that happens when people see something they didn't believe was possible. When reality contradicts expectation in a way that breaks the brain for a moment. Alara wiped her mouth with the back of her hand, looked at the blood on her glove, looked at Marcus, at Reed, at the 282 witnesses who just watched her get kicked down and were now watching her stand back up. When she spoke, her voice was different, not louder, colder. The temperature had dropped 20 degrees in the space between her and them. You kicked me down. She took a step forward. Marcus and Reed both tensed. I stood up. Another step. Blood dripped from her chin onto her uniform. She didn't wipe it away. You wanted me to kneel before you in submission. I knelt in service. There's a difference. You kicked me because I wouldn't give you what you wanted, because I wouldn't validate 4 years of blaming me for a choice that saved your brother's life. She was 5 feet away now, close enough that they could reach her in 2 strides, close enough that there was no retreat, no escape, just forward into whatever happened next. So here's what happens now. You activated live response protocol. This is no longer a demonstration. This is combat. And in combat, I defend myself and my patients with whatever force is necessary to neutralize the threat. She turned slightly, addressed Kane without taking her eyes off Marcus and Reed. Master Chief, clear the protocols. Kane's expression was unreadable. For a long moment, he didn't respond. Then he turned to Commander Hayes standing next to him. The commander nodded. Authorized, Kane said, but I'm calling it the second someone's injured beyond training parameters. Alara looked back at Marcus and Reed. They were both watching her now with different eyes, starting to understand that something had shifted, that the rules had changed in ways they hadn't anticipated. You forced this, she said. Both of you, remember that. Marcus came at her first. No coordination now, no plan, just anger and 4 years of narrative demanding validation. He charged, low and fast, trying to close distance before she could set up for redirection. Smart, but not smart enough. Alara didn't retreat. That's what they expected. That's what training said to do when someone bigger and heavier charged. Create space. Use distance. Wait for the right moment. Instead, she advanced, stepped into the attack. Counterintuitive. Exactly what Master Chief Kane had drilled into her 8 years ago. They expect you to retreat, so advance. They expect you to block, so redirect. Do what they don't expect. Marcus's right arm was extended, reaching for her. She caught his wrist with her left hand, stepped inside his reach with her right foot. Her right forearm drove laterally into the medial side of his right knee. 15 pounds of force. That's all she applied. 15 pounds at the exact moment when Marcus's full body weight was committed to that forward step. When his knee was locked straight, bearing all 230 pounds designed for flexion and extension, but catastrophically vulnerable to lateral stress. The medial collateral ligament tore first, completely. The sound was like fabric ripping, but deeper, wetter. Then the tibial plateau, the top surface of the shin bone where it articulates with the femur, it fractured under the compressive overload of 230 pounds, suddenly redirected 90 degrees from its intended path. Marcus went down. Not the controlled fall of a trained operator trying to minimize damage. This was involuntary, structural. His legs simply stopped supporting weight in any meaningful way, and his body had no choice but to follow. He hit the concrete and started screaming before his shoulder made contact. Reed froze, stared, his brain trying to process what just happened. How someone who'd just been kicked down and should have been incapacitated had just broken Marcus's leg in what looked like 3 seconds, but was actually 6.1 if you were counting from the moment Marcus started his charge. Then Reed's training kicked in. The training that said when your teammate goes down, you press the advantage. You don't freeze, you attack. He lunged at her, trying to grab her plate carrier, trying to use superior weight to overwhelm before she could set up another technique. Amateur mistake. He'd put his center of gravity too far forward, chasing the grab instead of securing his base first. Alara didn't try to stop his momentum. That would require strength she didn't have. Instead, she moved with it, rotated outside his reach. Her hands caught his right wrist, both of them, firm grip. And as his weight carried him forward, she pulled in the same direction he was already moving. Reed's feet left the ground for a fraction of a second as his momentum exceeded his ability to control it. Alara pivoted, still holding his wrist, and dropped her weight while pulling down and forward. He had no choice but to follow. His body described an arc through the air and impacted the concrete with his left side. But she wasn't done. As he fell, she'd already identified the target, his planted right leg, the one still bearing weight as he went down. She stepped behind it, using his body as a shield from any remaining threats, and drove her right heel into the fibula head just below his knee. The sound was distinct, sharp, wet, different from the sound of flesh hitting concrete. This was internal, structural. The sound of bone felling under force it wasn't designed to handle. Reed screamed, not the grunt of pain from getting hit, not the sharp cry of surprise. This was different, higher, more primal. The kind of sound that came from damage your body recognized as serious before your brain fully processed what had happened. Alara released his wrist, stepped back, dropped to one knee to assess. 7 seconds, 2 men down, 2 legs destroyed. Around her, 282 Navy SEALs stood in absolute shock. Not the silence of anticipation, the silence of watching something they hadn't believed was possible. Of men who'd been told their entire careers that they were the best warriors on earth, now having to rebuild their understanding of what that meant. She didn't celebrate, didn't pose, just turned immediately to Reed, who was curling around his shattered fibula face, white with shock. Medic, her voice cut through the silence like a blade. Reed's losing distal pulse. I need a splint in gauze now. 2 base medics broke from the crowd, sprinting forward with their trauma kits. Alara dropped to her knees next to Reed, her hands already moving with the automatic precision of 8 years of combat medicine. Stay still, she told him. Her voice was different now, not cold anymore, clinical, professional, the voice of someone who'd just transitioned from combatant back to healer in the space between heartbeats. Your ankle is dislocated. I'm checking vascular flow. Her fingers found the dorsalis pedis pulse point on the top of his foot. Weak, thready, not absent but compromised. She checked capillary refill in his toes. Slow. Too slow. Grade 3 ankle dislocation, she told the arriving medics. Probable spiral fibula fracture. Dorsalis pedis pulse present but weak. 2+, capillary refill delayed. Compartment syndrome risk is high. Manual reduction required within 5 minutes or we're looking at permanent vascular damage. The medics moved with her instructions, not questioning, following her lead because she was clearly the most experienced trauma responder in the compound. One started setting up for the reduction. The other moved to Marcus. Alara turned to the second medic. Marcus's knee, palpable MCL defect. Positive anterior drawer test suggests ACL involvement as well. Tibial plateau step-off is palpable on lateral examination. Immobilize at 15 degrees flexion. Ice, elevate. He's going to need surgery within 24 hours. The medic nodded, went to work. Marcus was still screaming, but quieter now. The kind of noise that came from pain too big to express with volume. He was staring at his leg, at the angle that was wrong, at the swelling already starting to distort the shape of his knee. Alara moved to him, knelt beside him. He tried to pull away, but he couldn't move without triggering waves of pain that made his vision go white. She leaned close, spoke quietly, quiet enough that only he could hear over his own breathing. 4 years ago in Kandahar, I made a choice. I chose to save your brother's life, knowing he'd never walk again. Today you made me make another choice. You kicked me down in front of 282 witnesses. You tried to humiliate me, to break me, to prove I don't belong. She paused, let him see her face, let him understand she wasn't gloating, wasn't celebrating, just stating facts. I stood back up, Marcus, and when you attacked me again, I defended myself. I broke your leg, and reads, both of you, 7 seconds. Minimum necessary force to stop the threat. Nothing more, nothing less. Marcus's eyes focused on her through the pain. She could see it, the first crack in 4 years of certainty. Now I'm going to do the same thing I did for your brother. I'm going to save you. Not because you deserve it, not because I need you to forgive me, but because that's what combat medics do. We choose life, every time, even when it's hard, even when it hurts, even when the person we're saving tried to break us first. She stood, turned to the crowd of 282 men who'd witnessed everything. You wanted to know if women can handle combat medicine under pressure, she said. Her voice carried across the silent compound. You wanted to know if we break when men try to intimidate us, when they kick us down, when they try to make us kneel. She gestured to Marcus and Reed, to the medics working frantically to stabilize them. Here's your answer. We don't break. We stand back up. We defend ourselves with exactly the force required to neutralize the threat. And then we immediately transition to saving the lives of the men who just tried to break us. She looked at Kane, at Commander Hayes, at the cameras that had recorded everything for people in Washington who would watch this and make decisions that affected 20 million women in uniform. That's not weakness. That's not failure. That's what competence looks like when someone forces you to prove it. The stretchers carried Marcus Brennan and Reed Holloway away 18 minutes after they'd entered the ring with plans to humiliate a woman they believed didn't belong. The medics moved with practiced efficiency, loading, securing, checking vitals one last time before the transport vehicles pulled away toward the Naval Medical Center, San Diego. Alara watched them go, blood still on her chin, ribs screaming where Marcus's boot had caught her, hip throbbing where Reed's kick had landed, but standing, still standing. Around her, 282 Navy SEALs were dispersing, slowly, small groups forming, conversations starting in low voices, the social processing of trauma, everyone trying to make sense of what they'd witnessed, trying to fit it into narratives that made sense, stories they could tell later that would explain away the cognitive dissonance of watching a woman half their size break 2 SEALs in 7 seconds. Commander Hayes approached. He was already on his radio, speaking in the clipped tones of someone coordinating multiple moving pieces simultaneously. Yes, sir, Senator Michaels, I understand. The footage is being secured now. Medical personnel are en route with both casualties. Captain Thorne is, yes, sir, she's uninjured beyond minor contusions. No, sir, she didn't initiate contact. The video will show that clearly. He lowered the radio, looked at Alara with an expression she couldn't quite read. Not approval exactly, something more complicated than that. Captain, I need you to come with me. Investigation starts immediately. You'll need to give a formal statement while the events are still fresh. Understood, sir. And Captain, Hayes paused. That was either the bravest thing I've ever seen or the most reckless. I haven't decided which yet. Master Chief Kane stepped forward. He held out Alara's captain's bars, the ones she'd handed him before removing rank protections and turning demonstration into combat. Put these back on, he said. You're an officer again. Alara took them. Her hands were shaking slightly from adrenaline that had nowhere else to go, but she managed to pin them back to her collar without dropping them. Master Chief, she said quietly, I broke them. You stopped them? There's a difference, Raheem. Daniel Brennan was still there, still at the ringside where he'd appeared like an apparition during the worst possible moment, or maybe the best possible moment, depending on how you looked at it. He wheeled closer now. His face was difficult to read, pain maybe, or recognition, or something else entirely. Captain Thorne, Lieutenant Brennan, my brother just learned what I learned 4 years ago in Kandahar. What's that? That you do what's necessary, nothing more, nothing less, that you don't choose violence for its own sake. You respond to it with exactly the force required to stop it. He glanced at the blood stain on the concrete where Marcus had fallen, where 7 seconds had taught a lesson that 4 years of words couldn't. He'll hate you more now, for a while. I know, but hate is exhausting. Eventually you run out of energy for it. Then you have to face what's underneath. And what's underneath, Daniel looked at her directly. Usually just fear. Fear that if you can do what he does, maybe what he does isn't as special as he was told. Maybe he isn't as irreplaceable as he believed. He started to wheel away, then stopped. Thank you, Captain. Not for Kandahar. I thanked you for that already. This is for something else. For showing Marcus what I couldn't. That the choice you made wasn't failure. It was the only choice that let me keep breathing. And breathing is what lets me be a father, a husband, a man. He rolled away through the dispersing crowd. 282 men parting automatically to let him through. Respect, or maybe just discomfort. Hard to tell the difference sometimes. The investigation room smelled like old coffee and fluorescent lights that had been burning for too many consecutive hours. Alara sat in a metal chair bolted to the floor facing a table where 3 people arranged papers and recording equipment with methodical precision. Commander Hayes, a legal officer whose name tape read Peterson, and a woman in Navy medical dress uniform, Captain Rank. Name tape read Thornhill, older, maybe 50, the kind of face that had seen enough combat medicine to know real trauma from performance art. Captain Thorne, Hayes began. For the record, today is September 14th, 2024. Time is 1400 hours. This is a formal inquiry into the events that occurred during the Defensive Protocols demonstration at 0800 this morning. You understand you're not under investigation for wrongdoing, but we need your statement for the record. I understand, sir. Hayes slid a tablet across the table. Security footage, 3 angles. I need you to watch it and walk us through your decision-making process at key moments. Alara took the tablet, pressed play. The footage was sterile, clinical, high-definition video from multiple cameras that had captured everything. No sound in this version, just visual record of what 282 witnesses had seen with their own eyes. She watched herself kneel in the ring, watched Marcus and Reed position themselves, watched the moment of stillness before violence, then the attack, fast even in playback, brutal in its clarity, 2 men launching coordinated kicks at someone whose back was turned, someone who'd been kneeling in the most vulnerable position possible. She watched herself get hit, watched her body slam concrete, watched herself lie motionless for 3 seconds that looked like 30 on video, then watched herself stand. The rest unfolded exactly as she remembered. Reed's lunge, her redirect, the pivot, the heel strike, his fall, Marcus's charge, her advance, the lateral strike, his collapse. 7 seconds from standing to both men down, both legs destroyed. She set the tablet down. They executed a coordinated assault with clear intent to cause injury, she said. Her voice was steady, clinical, the voice of someone reporting facts, not defending actions. I assessed immediate threat to my physical safety. I issued verbal warning that live response protocol was activated. They ignored it. I neutralized both threats using minimum necessary force calculated to stop their attack without causing permanent disability. Then I immediately transitioned to medical response and directed casualty care. Legal Officer Peterson leaned forward. Walk me through minimum necessary force. Senior Operator Brennan requires reconstructive knee surgery. Trainee Holloway has a spiral fibula fracture and grade 3 ankle dislocation. Those aren't minor injuries, Captain. No, sir, they're not. But they're also not permanent disabilities. Both men will recover full function with proper rehabilitation. The alternative was allowing them to continue attacking me, which would have resulted in either my incapacitation or escalation to more severe defensive measures. More severe how? Alara met his eyes. Strikes to the head or neck, joint destruction beyond surgical repair, tactics designed to permanently disable rather than temporarily neutralize. The room went quiet for a moment. Captain Thornhill spoke. Her voice was crisp, professional, the voice of someone who'd worked trauma medicine long enough to recognize the real thing when she heard it. I've reviewed both men's injuries in detail, Captain Thorne. Your assessment is medically accurate. Senior Operator Brennan's knee can be surgically repaired, 12 to 14 months rehabilitation. He'll regain full range of motion. Trainee Holloway's fibula and ankle will heal with proper treatment, 8 to 10 months. Both men will be able to return to active duty status with appropriate physical therapy. She paused, made a note on her tablet. If you'd wanted to permanently disable them, you had multiple opportunities during those 7 seconds. You didn't take them. That suggests your force calculation was precise, not excessive. Hayes made a note. Look back at Alara. The footage shows you removed your rank insignia before the final engagement. Explain that decision. I wanted to eliminate any question about whether this was assault on a superior officer or mutual combat under training protocols. Removing my rank put us on equal footing, made it clear I was engaging as a combatant, not exercising command authority. That shows premeditation. Yes, sir. I premeditated my legal defense while being attacked. I'd do it again. Hayes almost smiled at that, almost. We've collected witness statements, 47 so far from the 282 present, all consistent. Senior Operator Brennan and Trainee Holloway attacked first. You warned them. They ignored the warning. Your response was defensive in nature. He pulled out a paper, set it on the table. We also have Lieutenant Daniel Brennan's written statement. I'm going to read part of it for the record. He cleared his throat. Captain Alara Thorne saved my life 4 years ago under sustained enemy fire while performing emergency surgery. She fought off 3 Taliban fighters while keeping me alive. She chose to save me knowing I would be paralyzed from the waist down. My brother Marcus blamed her for my disability. I never did. She gave me 20 more years with my wife and daughters. Today she defended herself against my brother's assault with restraint I didn't know was possible. She could have killed him. She stopped at incapacitation and immediately treated his injuries. That is the definition of a warrior healer. That is what competence looks like under pressure. My brother learned today what I learned 4 years ago, that Captain Thorne makes impossible choices and lives with the consequences. And that living with consequences is harder than dying to avoid them. Hayes set the paper down. That's a strong endorsement, Captain, from the man at the center of this entire situation. Lieutenant Brennan is a good man who made peace with his injuries 4 years ago. His brother hasn't. No, and now his brother is in surgery learning what peace with injury looks like from the other side. Peterson pulled up something on his tablet. We need to discuss context. The demonstration wasn't just a training exercise. Naval Command authorized it as an assessment of female medic integration into high-stress combat environments. Senator Richard Michaels was observing via live feed. He's been drafting legislation regarding female exclusion from certain combat roles. Your performance today directly impacts that legislation. I'm aware. Are you aware that if you'd failed, if you'd broken under pressure or quit or been unable to perform after being assaulted, that Senator Michaels had a bill ready to go to committee within 48 hours, the Female Combat Exclusion Reinstatement Act? It would have reversed 15 years of integration progress. Alara felt something cold in her chest. She'd known the stakes were high. She hadn't known they were that specific. No, sir, I wasn't aware of the exact timeline. Hayes leaned back. Senator Michaels withdrew the bill 3 hours ago, permanently. He released a statement saying the footage from your demonstration provides clear evidence that female combat medics can perform under extreme duress, that your actions today demonstrate integration is working as intended. He paused. Let that sink in. You didn't just defend yourself today, Captain. You defended every woman serving in combat roles. 20 million women in uniform owe you a debt they'll never know about. I was just doing my job, sir. Your job was to demonstrate defensive protocols. You did that, but you also did something else, something more important. He gestured to the footage still frozen on the tablet, the moment where Alara was standing over Marcus and Reed, blood on her chin, medics rushing in, 282 witnesses watching. You proved that competence has no gender, that when someone kicks you down, the only thing that matters is whether you stand back up and what you do after you stand. Hayes closed his folder. Based on the evidence, I'm ruling this justified self-defense under training protocols. No charges will be filed against you. Senior Operator Brennan and Trainee Holloway will face administrative action for assault on an instructor during a sanctioned training exercise. Brennan will be medically discharged pending surgery outcome. Holloway will be removed from the SEAL pipeline for 18 months minimum and required to undergo psychological evaluation before reinstatement consideration. He stood. Peterson and Thornhill followed. You're dismissed, Captain. But before you go, there's someone who wants to speak with you. Master Chief Kane entered the room. He carried a folder, worn, official-looking, the kind of paperwork that changed lives. Captain Thorne, he said, Naval Special Warfare Command has approved the Combat Medicine Integration Program. 20 female combat medics, 16-week course. You've been selected as chief instructor. Budget is $2.3 million. Congressional oversight has been waived due to the results of today's demonstration. You have full autonomy over curriculum and standards. He slid the folder across the table. First class reports Monday, October 28th, 6 weeks from today. That gives you time to develop curriculum and heal those ribs. Alara opened the folder. 20 names, 20 women from different branches, different backgrounds, different reasons for volunteering. All of them about to learn what she'd learned today. That standing back up after being kicked down was only half the lesson. The other half was what you did with your hands once you were standing. Lieutenant Sophie Carmichael, 27, Army combat medic, 2 deployments. Notes indicated history of harassment in previous unit. Formal complaint filed and dismissed for insufficient evidence. Sergeant Morgan Blackwell, 29, Navy Hospital Corpsman, 1 deployment. Notes indicated she'd been removed from Special Operations medical training the pipeline after instructors claimed she couldn't handle the physical requirements. Her fitness scores were higher than 70% of male candidates who'd passed. Corporal Avery Sinclair, 24, Air Force pararescue trainee, 0 deployments. Notes indicated she'd been told repeatedly she was too attractive to be taken seriously by male trainees. Had filed 3 separate complaints, all dismissed. 20 women, 20 stories of being told they didn't belong, of being kicked down in ways big and small, of standing back up and trying again only to be kicked down harder. Alara looked up at Kane. When do I start? Tomorrow, curriculum development. You'll have access to all training facilities and support staff. Master Sergeant Collins will be your administrative liaison. He's already been briefed. Kane pulled out one more thing. A small box. Wooden. Old. He opened it. Inside was a knife. It was different from the one he'd given her yesterday. Older. The handle was darker. More worn. The blade had been maintained meticulously, but showed decades of use. This was Captain Rachel Ashford's knife, Kane said quietly. Desert Storm, 1991. She carried it through the entire war, through convoys that got hit, through Scud attacks, through every moment when men told her she didn't belong and she had to prove them wrong. He lifted the knife out of the box, held it horizontally between them. She gave this to me after the war, after saving my life and the lives of 39 other men who'd protested her command. She told me something I've never forgotten. What did she tell you? She said, Victor, carry this as a reminder. When someone demands you kneel before them, when someone tries to intimidate you into submission, you have 2 choices. Submit and lose yourself, or stand and risk everything. I chose to stand. I'll always choose to stand. And someday, you'll have to teach someone else how to make that choice. He placed the knife in Alara's hand. Rachel died in 2019. Cancer. I went to her funeral. 2,000 people, half of them men who'd served under her. Men who'd protested her assignments and then learned to respect her. Men whose lives she'd saved by being better at her job than we wanted to admit. His voice was rough now, the emotion he usually kept buried surfacing, despite his control. I told her daughter at the funeral that her mother taught me the most important lesson of my career, that my pride almost got me killed, that refusing to seek competence because I was looking for gender was the biggest failure of my military service. He closed Alara's fingers around the knife. You're carrying this forward now. Not because you need it, because the 20 women you're about to train do. They need to know this fight isn't new. That women have been standing when men demanded they kneel since the first woman put on a uniform. And that every generation has to prove it again. And again, and again. Until the lesson finally sticks. Alara felt the weight of the knife, the history compressed into steel and wood. Rachel Ashford in 1991. Kane learning hard lessons in the desert. Now her. Now 20 women who would learn from her what she'd learned from Kane, what he'd learned from Rachel. A chain of competence and refusal stretching back through decades. Thank you, Master Chief. Don't thank me, just don't waste it. 20 women in 6 weeks, make them better than you. That's the only thanks I need. He left. Peterson and Thornhill followed. Hayes paused at the door. One more thing, Captain. The footage from today is going to leak, probably within 48 hours. Someone always has a phone. Someone always records what they're not supposed to. When it goes public, you're going to become famous in ways you won't enjoy. I understand, sir. Do you? Because right now, you're the medic who broke 2 SEALs. That's the story. That's what people will remember. Your job over the next 6 weeks is to turn that story into something else. Something that helps instead of hurts. Something that teaches instead of intimidates. How do I do that? Hayes smiled. You figure that out, you let me know. I've been trying to control narratives for 20 years. Hasn't worked yet. He left. The door closed. Alara sat alone in the investigation room with two knives, Kane's original gift, Rachel Ashford's legacy, and a folder containing 20 names of women who were about to walk into the same fight she just survived. She opened the folder again, read the names, read the stories, saw herself in every single one of them. The harassment, the dismissal, the being told you don't belong, followed by being proven wrong, followed by having to prove yourself again because once was never enough. She closed the folder. Tomorrow she'd start building curriculum. But right now she needed to do something else. She pulled out her phone, found the number she'd called 2 nights ago, dialed. Daniel Brennan answered on the second ring. Captain Thorne? Lieutenant Brennan, I wanted to call and tell you something. What's that? Your brother is in surgery right now. The doctors say his prognosis is good. Full recovery expected with proper rehabilitation. 12 to 14 months. He'll walk again. He'll run. He might even return to active duty if he wants it badly enough. Daniel was quiet for a moment. Thank you for telling me, and thank you for saving him. Again. I didn't save him today. I broke him. You stopped him from making the biggest mistake of his life, from permanently destroying his career and his honor over 4 years of misplaced anger. You gave him a chance to learn the lesson I learned in Kandahar. What lesson is that? That being broken doesn't mean being destroyed. That recovery is possible. That life continues after the worst moment you can imagine. And that the people who break you sometimes are the same people who give you the chance to be better than you were before. Alara heard voices in the background. Children, Daniel's daughters, 4 years old now, growing up with a father who couldn't walk but could love them more than anything. I have to go, Daniel said. Emma's making dinner and the girls need help setting the table. But Captain Thorne, one more thing. What? The 20 women you're about to train, they're going to face what you faced today. Maybe not physically, maybe not all at once, but they're going to be kicked down. They're going to be told they don't belong. They're going to have to stand back up in front of witnesses who want them to fail. I know. Then teach them what you learned. Not just how to fight, how to stand after being knocked down, how to choose life even when life is hard, how to be exactly who they are without apology or compromise. That's the real lesson. The rest is just technique. The line went dead. Alara sat in the empty investigation room and thought about lessons. About Rachel Ashford in 1991 teaching Kane that competence has no gender. About Kane teaching her that physics doesn't care about opinions. About her teaching Marcus Brennan that kicking someone down doesn't mean they stay down. About what she'd teach 20 women who were walking into a fight that had been going on for decades and would continue long after she was gone. 3 months later, December 2024, Christmas season. Marcus Brennan stood in the Physical Therapy Center at Naval Medical Center, San Diego. Stood, not sat, not lay. Stood on 2 legs that had taken 3 surgeries and 92 days of rehabilitation to rebuild into something that could support weight. He was using a walker, would graduate to a cane in another month, would maybe possibly eventually walk unassisted if he did everything right and got lucky with how the scar tissue healed. The physical therapist watched him take 3 steps. Stop. Breathe through the pain. Take 3 more. You're pushing too hard, she said. Recovery is a marathon, not a sprint. I don't do slow. That's why you're here, senior operator. You tried to force something that needed patience. Now you're learning patience the hard way. Marcus took 3 more steps. Stopped. His knee was screaming. Not the acute pain of injury, the chronic ache of healing that would be his companion for the next year. Can I ask you something, the therapist said. What? Do you regret it, the demonstration? What you did to Captain Thorne? Marcus was quiet for a long moment, took 3 more steps, stopped. Every day. Why'd you do it? Because I spent 4 years being angry my brother was in a wheelchair. 4 years blaming someone else for a choice I wouldn't have had the courage to make. 4 years thinking that if I could prove she was wrong, somehow that would make Dan's situation less my fault for not being there when it happened. He sat down heavily on the nearest bench. The walker clattered as he set it aside. I was wrong. About everything. Captain Thorne didn't fail my brother. She saved him. And I spent 4 years trying to punish her for giving Dan 20 more years with his family. The therapist sat next to him. What changed? I got kicked down, and when I tried to stand back up, I couldn't. My leg wouldn't support me, And while I was lying there screaming, Captain Thorne knelt next to me, not in submission, in service. She treated my injuries, saved my leg, gave me a chance to walk again. He looked at his knee, at the surgical scars that would never fully fade. That's when I understood. She doesn't need anyone to kneel before her. She doesn't need validation or revenge or acknowledgement. She just does her job, saves lives, makes impossible choices, stands back up when people kick her down, and then saves the people who kicked her. Sounds like you learned something. Yeah, I learned I was an idiot, and that being an idiot has permanent consequences. 3 days later, Marcus got a visitor at his rehabilitation facility, his brother Daniel, wheeling through the door with the practiced ease of someone who'd had 4 years to master the chair. Marcus was in the common area, walking laps with his walker. 3 steps. Breathe, 3 more. The routine that defined his days now. Daniel watched for a moment, then wheeled closer. Looking good, little brother. Marcus stopped, turned. For the first time in 4 years, he really looked at Daniel. Not at the wheelchair, at Daniel, at the man who'd survived Kandahar and 3 surgeries and 4 years of rehabilitation to become something his brother had been too angry to see. Dan, what are you doing here? Visiting. Emma and the girls are outside. They wanted to give us a minute first. For what? Daniel wheeled closer, stopped a few feet away. To talk about Captain Thorne, about Kandahar, about what happened in September. Marcus set the walker aside, sat down. His knee was grateful for the rest. I'm sorry, he said, for everything, for 4 years of blaming her, for trying to humiliate her, for not listening when you tried to tell me she saved your life. Daniel nodded. Apology accepted. Now let me tell you something. He gestured at his wheelchair, at himself, at the life he'd built in 4 years. You see a wheelchair, you see what I lost. Legs, mobility, the ability to run and jump and do all the things SEALs are supposed to do. Yes, I see something different. I see my daughters. Emma gave birth to them while I was in rehabilitation, December 20th, 2020, 3 months after Kandahar. They were premature, tiny. The doctors said if I died in that tent, Emma would have been a single mother raising twins alone. His voice got quieter. But I didn't die, because Captain Thorne chose life over legs, chose breathing over walking, chose 20 more years over dying with dignity. I know that now. Because knowing it intellectually is different from understanding it, from feeling it, from watching your daughters to take their first steps while you're sitting in a chair and realizing that you'd trade your legs 1,000 times over for the privilege of watching them grow. Marcus felt something break in his chest, 4 years of anger cracking under the weight of understanding that came too late. I wasted 4 years. Yes, but you don't have to waste more. Captain Thorne is training 20 women right now, teaching them defensive protocols, teaching them how to stand when people try to kick them down, teaching them to be exactly what she is. Daniel wheeled even closer. She doesn't need your apology, Marcus. She doesn't need your validation. But the women she's training could use something you have now that you didn't have before. What's that perspective? You tried to break someone because you couldn't accept a choice that saved someone you love. You failed. You got broken instead. And now you're learning what recovery looks like, what it costs, what it takes. Daniel reached into his bag, pulled out a card, handed it to Marcus. Veterans Affairs is looking for counselors, people who understand combat trauma, who understand anger and blame and the temptation to make someone else responsible for things you can't control. People who've been there, who've made mistakes, who've learned hard lessons. Marcus looked at the card. VA Regional Office, San Diego. Contact information for the counseling program. You think I should apply? I think you should turn your mistake into something useful. Captain Thorne saved my life and gave you a lesson you'll never forget. The least you can do is help other veterans who are where you were, angry, blaming, unable to see past what they lost to understand what they still have. Marcus held the card, thought about 4 years of wasted anger, about September 14th when he tried to humiliate someone who'd given his brother everything that mattered, about lying on concrete with a destroyed knee while the woman he'd kicked down knelt beside him to save him. I'll think about it. Good, now come outside. Your nieces want to see their Uncle Marcus walk. 6 months later, June 2025, 16 weeks after the first class of the Combat Medicine Integration Program began, the graduation ceremony was held outdoors. California, sun burning down on a formation of 20 women in dress uniforms. Behind them, a banner read Combat Medicine Integration Program. Class 1, 16 weeks. Zero failures. Master Chief Kane stood at the podium, Commander Hayes beside him, Captain Thornhill, representing Naval Medical Command, and sitting in the front row of observers, Lieutenant Daniel Brennan in his wheelchair. And standing to the side, leaning on a cane, Marcus Brennan. He'd been invited, had almost declined, had ultimately come because his brother had asked and because he'd learned that when people offer you chances at redemption, you take them. Alara stood at attention in front of the formation. Behind her, 20 women who'd spent 16 weeks learning what she'd learned over 8 years. How to redirect momentum. How to break joints when breaking joints was the only option. How to transition from warrior to healer in the space between heartbeats. How to stand back up after being kicked down. But more than that, they'd learned something else. Something harder to teach, but more important than technique. They'd learned that belonging wasn't given. It was earned through performance that couldn't be denied. Through competence that transcended gender. Through the willingness to be exactly who they were without apology or compromise. Kane spoke. His voice carried across the assembled observers, military personnel, family members, press that had been carefully vetted. 16 weeks ago, 20 women reported to this facility. They came from different branches, different backgrounds, different experiences, but they had one thing in common. They'd all been told at some point that they didn't belong, that combat medicine was too hard, too dangerous, too demanding for women to handle. He paused, let that sink in. Today, all 20 of them are graduating. 0 failures, 0 dropouts, 0 cases of being unable to handle the pressure. He gestured to Alara. Captain Thorne, their instructor, set a standard that many thought was impossible. She demanded excellence. She demanded precision. She demanded that these women be so good that no one could deny they belonged. Not because they were women, because they were warriors. Kane stepped aside. Alara approached the podium. She looked out at the 20 women who'd entrusted her with 16 weeks of their lives. Sophie Carmichael in the front rank, Morgan Blackwell beside her, Avery Sinclair at the end. 20 women who'd walked into this program wondering if they were good enough and were walking out knowing they were better than good enough. They were exactly what combat medicine needed. 16 weeks ago, Alara said, I told you I wasn't here to inspire you. I was here to weaponize you, to make you so competent that gender became irrelevant, to give you skills that transcended politics and policy and prejudice. She paused. I taught you defensive protocols, joint manipulation, momentum redirection, how to break bones when breaking bones keeps you alive. But that wasn't the real lesson. The formation was absolutely silent. The real lesson was this. You will be kicked down, not maybe, not possibly. You will face people who demand you kneel, who try to intimidate you, who want to prove you don't belong. And when that happens, when someone kicks you down in front of witnesses who want to see you fail, you have one choice that matters. She looked at each of them, made eye contact, made sure they understood. Stand back up. The words hung in the air. Not because you're strong, not because you're proving something, but because standing back up is the only way forward. And once you're standing, you do your job. You save lives, you treat casualties. You be exactly who you are. A combat medic who happens to be a woman. Not a woman trying to be a combat medic. The difference matters. She stepped back. Kane called them to attention, read the names, presented certificates. Each woman walked forward, received her graduation credentials, returned to formation. When all 20 had been certified, Kane called for a special presentation. We have a guest today who asked to speak. He's not military personnel. He's not command staff, but he has something to say that these women need to hear. Marcus Brennan stood, used his cane to navigate the 3 steps to the podium, stood there for a moment, looking at 20 women who just graduated from a program that existed because his attempt to break their instructor had proven why the program was necessary. My name is Marcus Brennan, he said. His voice wasn't as strong as Kane's, but it carried. 6 months ago, I tried to humiliate Captain Thorne. I demanded she kneel before me in front of 282 witnesses. When she refused, I kicked her down, tried to prove she didn't belong, tried to make her an example of female failure in combat roles. He shifted his weight. His knee was aching, would always ache, permanent reminder of permanent consequences. I was wrong about everything. Captain Thorne didn't fail, I did. She stood back up after I kicked her down, defended herself, broke my leg, then immediately treated my injury and saved my ability to walk. He looked at the 20 graduates. I'm telling you this because you're going to meet people like me, people who are afraid of your competence, who need you to fail to validate their prejudices, who will demand you kneel, who will kick you down when you refuse. His voice got stronger now. When that happens, remember what Captain Thorne taught you. Stand back up. Do your job. Be so good at your gum that the people who tried to break you have to watch you save them anyway. That's not revenge. That's professionalism. And professionalism is what changes cultures. He stepped back. There was silence for a moment. Then Sophie Carmichael started clapping, slow, deliberate. Then Morgan joined her, then Avery, then all 20 graduates, then the observers, then everyone. Marcus stood there, leaning on his cane, receiving applause he didn't deserve. Applause for admitting failure, for acknowledging mistakes, for becoming something better than he'd been before someone broke his leg and taught him humility through pain. He caught Alara's eye across the ceremony space. She nodded once, not forgiveness, not absolution, just acknowledgement. That he'd learned, that learning mattered, that becoming better was possible even after being broken. 18 months later, December 2026. Alara's office at Naval Special Warfare Command was small but functional. Desk, computer, filing cabinets, window overlooking the compound where 6 classes of female combat medics had now graduated. 120 women total, 97% retention rate, 0 failures attributed to gender. On her desk, a shadow box. Inside it, 2 knives. The one Master Chief Kane had given her that first day. The one Rachel Ashford had carried through Desert Storm. Both of them symbols of a fight that had been going on longer than Alara had been alive. A fight that would continue long after she was gone. Next to the shadow box photographs, young Kane with Rachel Ashford, Kuwait 1991. 2 soldiers who'd learned hard lessons in the desert. Class 1 graduation, 20 women in dress uniforms. Proof that lessons learned could be passed forward. Her phone buzzed. Text message. Unknown number. She opened it. A photograph. Combat medic in full gear. Blood on her gloves. Exhausted smile. Desert background. Afghanistan. The message read, first hot extraction under fire. Patient with T12L1 spinal injury. Taliban ambush. Remembered your words from graduation. Choose life. Always. Patient stable. Going to walk again. New surgical techniques are incredible, but precision is still precision. Thank you for teaching me to stand back up. Lieutenant Sophie Carmichael. Alara stared at the photograph, at Sophie covered in someone else's blood, at the exhaustion and pride and satisfaction that came from doing impossible things under impossible circumstances, at the full circle moment of a student applying lessons learned and saving someone the way Alara had saved Daniel Brennan 6 years ago. Except Sophie's patient would walk again, because medicine had advanced, because techniques had improved, because the field kept moving forward even as the fundamental lessons stayed the same. Choose life. Stand back up. Be exactly who you are. Her office phone rang. She answered. Captain Thorne. Alara, it's Daniel Brennan. She hadn't heard from him in months, not since the Class 1 graduation when he'd sat in the front row and watched 20 women learn what his injury had taught her. Lieutenant, how can I help you? I'm calling with news about Marcus. Alara felt something tighten in her chest. Is he okay? Better than okay, he just got promoted. VA Regional Director for Southern California. He's been counseling veterans for the past year, helping people who are angry, who blame others, who can't see past what they lost. He's helped over 200 men so far, helped them understand that being broken isn't being destroyed. Daniel paused. He wants to do something. He wants to guest lecture for your program. Class 7. He wants to talk to them about accountability, about what happens when fear makes you do stupid things, about learning from mistakes. Alara was quiet for a moment, thinking about Marcus 6 months ago, leaning on a cane, admitting failure, choosing growth over pride. Tell him yes. You sure after what he did? He learned the lesson, Daniel. That's what matters. And your brother helping 200 veterans means 200 fewer people making his mistakes. Class 7 needs to hear that story. They need to know that people can change, that redemption is possible, that standing back up applies to everyone, not just them. Thank you, Captain, for everything, for saving my life, for teaching my brother humility, for showing 282 SEALs that competence has no gender, for training 120 women who are changing how the military thinks about combat medicine. I was just doing my job. That's what Captain Ashford said to Kane in 1991. That's what you said after breaking Marcus's leg. That's what every competent professional says when they do extraordinary things, just doing my job. But jobs change cultures. Jobs save lives. Jobs teach lessons that echo for generations. The line went dead. Alara sat at her desk and looked at the shadow box. At Rachel Ashford's knife from Desert Storm. At Kane's knife from her first day. At the photographs of lessons passed forward through decades. At the text from Sophie proving that teaching worked, that competence could be learned, that standing back up could become automatic. She thought about September 14th, 2024, about being kicked down in front of 282 witnesses, about standing back up with blood on her chin and choosing precision over pride, about 7 seconds that changed everything. But mostly she thought about what came after, the investigation, the program, the 120 women, the 847 more who would graduate in the years to come, the culture shift that happened one student at a time, one lesson at a time, one person standing back up at a time. Her computer chimed. Email from Naval Personnel Command. Subject line promotion orders. She opened it. Captain Alara Thorne, effective January 1st, 2027, you are promoted to Major and reassigned as Director Combat Medicine Integration Program, Naval Special Warfare Command. Congratulations. Your work has exceeded all expectations. Commander Hayes. She read it twice. Let it settle. Major, Director, authority to expand what she'd built from one base to the entire Naval Special Warfare System. She thought about responding, decided it could wait. Instead, she pulled out the bottle of bourbon Kane had given her after Class 1 graduated, poured 2 glasses, set one in front of the shadow box, next to Rachel Ashford's knife, next to Kane's knife, next to the photographs of people who'd learned lessons and passed them forward. She raised her glass, toasted ghosts and teachers and students and everyone who'd ever been kicked down and had to choose whether to stay down or stand back up. To Master Chief Kane, she said quietly, retired in Montana. To Captain Rachel Ashford, who cleared the path in '91. To Lieutenant Daniel Brennan and his daughters. To Marcus Brennan, learning to help instead of hurt. To 120 women who prove competence has no gender. And to the 800 more who will prove it again. She drank. The bourbon burned the same way it had 18 months ago when Kane had first told her about Rachel. The same way it would burn 18 months from now when she'd toast Class 12. The same way it would always burn because some things didn't change. Some lessons stayed constant. Some truths remained true, regardless of generation or gender or circumstance. Stand up when kicked down. Choose life when choice is hard. Be exactly who you are without apology. Pass the lessons forward. Make the next generation better than you. That was legacy. Not the breaking, not the standing. The teaching that came after. The students who became teachers. The lessons that echoed. Outside her window, the Pacific hammered the coastline with the kind of violence that had been happening for millennia and would continue long after she was gone. Constant, relentless. Indifferent to individual struggles. But inside this office, inside this program, inside the 120 women who'd graduated and the 847 who would come after something else was happening, something that did care, something that mattered, something that would outlive them all. The choice to stand, the refusal to kneel, the precision that made arguments irrelevant. That was what Rachel had taught Kane, what Kane had taught her, what she'd taught 120 women, what they would teach thousands more. She set the glass down, looked at the 2 knives on her desk. Rachel Ashford's blade worn smooth by decades of women refusing to kneel. Kane's gift passed forward with the wisdom of a man who'd learned too late that pride could kill. And tomorrow she'd begin training Class 7, 20 more women, 20 more chances to prove the lesson. 20 more links in a chain that stretched back to 1991 and forward to a future where maybe this fight wouldn't need to be fought anymore. Maybe. Or maybe every generation would have to stand back up after being kicked down. Maybe that was the price of progress. The cost of change. The tax on competence that refused to stay quiet. She could live with that. She'd been living with it for 6 years, since Kandahar, since the moment she chose Daniel Brennan's life over his legs, since the moment she learned that some choices echo forever, that some consequences can't be undone, and that the only thing harder than making impossible decisions was living with them afterward. Her phone buzzed one more time. Text from Master Chief Kane. Retired now, fishing in Montana, living the life he'd earned. The message was short. Saw Sophie's picture. Rachel would be proud. So am I. Keep standing, Captain. Alara typed back, "Always, Master Chief, always." She turned off her office light, walked out into the December night where the Pacific wind carried salt and the promise of morning. Where somewhere 20 women were preparing for Class 7. Where somewhere Sophie Carmichael was saving lives in Kandahar. Where somewhere Marcus Brennan was helping a veteran understand that being broken wasn't being destroyed. Where somewhere the fight continued. And she was ready for it. Because that's what Captain Alara Thorne did. What Rachel Ashford had done. What every woman who'd ever been told she didn't belong had done. They stood. They stood back up. They stood again. And they never ever knelt.